doing it this way a try. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife and today I am going to take you through all of the books that I read in October, and I'm going to give you some stats on how my October reading went as well, so that you can have a little idea as to how everything went. I've seen a couple of other booktubers who do this at the start of their wrap-up videos. They do stats on how many books that they've read, or how many DNFs that they had, or how many pages and hours, and I felt like that might be something really interesting to let you guys know. So let's see how you find it. Over the month of October, I read 11 books, I had 2 DNFs, I read 1,242 pages and 41 hours of audiobook. For the formats, I read 3 physical books, 7 were audiobooks, and there was 1 ebook. For the age range, there was 7 adult books, 1 was for a YA audience and 3 were for children. For the star ratings, I gave 1 3.5 star, 5 4 stars, 4 4.5 stars, and there was 1 book that I didn't rate because it was a non-fiction book. There are a couple of books that I'm not going to talk to you in too much detail here because they were on my autumn TBR, so I'm going to be talking about them in another wrap-up video, or I've already done vlogs about them, so I've already spoken about them quite at length. But let's start with the books that I DNF'd in October. The first one was Hex Appeal by Kate Johnson. And I think I kind of put myself under the truck here with this one because I had been kind of looking at Goodreads and I had been listening to the book for most of it. And then I realised that the character's name on Goodreads was not matching up with the character who I was supposed to be reading about. I think on Goodreads the character's name was Jack, and in this book the character's name was Levi or something like that. And that was when I realised I had been reading and listening to and hearing about the wrong book. So once I figured out my mistake, I actually went back to the start of the book and tried to get into it from there, but I think I just hadn't got the brain power for it anymore. I think there was just something that was holding me back a little bit, but also it felt like the story wasn't going anywhere. It felt like there was nothing happening that was really dragging me back into the book, and I never really found myself reaching for it. Like if I was in the office, I'd listen to a podcast or I'd listen to a Spotify playlist before I would start reaching for this book. Rarely a good sign. My next DNF was a bit of a surprise because it came from an author whose other books I have truly adored. So it may have just been the wrong book at the wrong time, but I really did not enjoy Unravelling Oliver by Liz Nugent. I actually gave up on this one pretty early on because there was nothing that was gripping me about it. There was nothing that I felt like I had to keep reading. I had to find out what was happening. I had to learn what was happening to these characters or in this situation. I also found Oliver, who is one of the characters that we are following. It is quite a heavy narrative with a lot of characters in there, but I feel like Oliver, who was one of the characters that we were following quite a bit, he was detestable. There was nothing about him that made me want to keep reading about him. There was nothing that enamored me to him. And when you're such a character-driven reader, if you're reading a book where you don't enjoy reading about these people, why are you going to keep picking it back up? So let's go on to the books that I actually did read cover to cover. And the first of those was Autumn by Ali Smith. I got a copy of this from my library and it was a buddy read with Shannon from 155 Books and Amelia from Amelia Barlow Books. We decided among ourselves that we're going to read the 4 books out of the seasonal quartet. So we've already done Autumn, which is the first book in the series, and then we've got the other 3 that we're going to work across 2024, and I am so excited to read it with these 2. Autumn is set in quite a tumultuous time in the UK. It's set in like the September, October, November, just after the Brexit referendum has passed. And you can definitely feel this level of hatred across the country. You can definitely feel people who have woken up and decided that they don't like this person particularly because of where they come from, or that this person voted in a different way to how they had decided the vote to go. So there's now neighbour pit against neighbour, there's brother pit against brother, and that's definitely something that had happened across the UK, and I felt like it was written and portrayed so well. The book as a whole is also really beautifully written. The writing flows really well. It's super atmospheric. You can actually feel that this is set in autumn. You can feel the change in weather. You can feel the temperatures start to drop. It's so well done. I will say that the time jumps were a little bit confusing. You go between the narrative that is happening right now with Elizabeth, who is 32 and who is going through the motions of being an adult, figuring things out for herself. And also you were going back to when she was a child, when she was like 8, and then she was 12, and then she was 16, and the relationship that she had with her neighbour Daniel, and how they had gotten a lot closer as she had gotten a lot older. I didn't like the direction that this relationship went into. I would have preferred if it had stayed as a kind of a granddaughter-grandfather relationship. I felt like there were some hints that Elizabeth had started to fall in love with Daniel, and I really didn't like it going that way. I really wished that it had just stayed as a purely platonic familial relationship. There was also a chapter in here where every sentence started with all across the country, pretty much set the couple of days after the referendum, and all across the country people are waking up to a different horizon. All across the country people are doing this. All across the country this is happening. And I thought that that was so well done. It really grabbed me the entire time that I was reading it. And I thought that it was so simple as a plot device, but it was so well executed. Across the other 3 books in the series, I'm interested to see if there's going to be any kind of interconnection with the others. I'm interested to see if characters from this one are going to appear as maybe a side character or another main character in any of the books that are coming up. I'm always really interested to see how books in the series are going to connect with each other, so maybe, hopefully, that's going to happen with these ones too. Then I read Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jesse Q. Sutanto. I read and loved the Dial A for Auntie series, and I felt like this would be something similar to it. It's a kind of a cozy mystery where it's very low stakes. You're just trying to figure out what's been happening, and you're following a cast of very bumbling characters as they're trying to get to the bottom of everything. In this book, you are following Vera Wong, who is in her 60s. She is widowed. She is a mother to a son. I think he is in his early 20s or so. And she has a very strictly set out routine. She wakes up at 4:30 every morning, has a cup of tea, and then goes off to her tea shop. I feel like at times Vera was written older than she actually was. My own parents are in their 60s. And I don't feel like they are the same way that Vera was written. And I know that it's a very different culture, and I know that it's a very different situation. But I do feel at times like Vera was almost written like she was 20 years older than she actually was, which threw me off a little bit at times. One day, Vera goes down to her tea shop and notices that there is a dead body there. Somebody has broken in, and there is now a murder case that is going to be involving her tea shop. And this is such a little interesting homage to CSI and to Law and Order, where Vera almost takes it upon herself to be the chief inspector of this case, and there are a couple of other people who are involved, such as the wife of the deceased and his brother, and a podcaster who wants to do an episode about this murder case that you've just heard about. And Vera is starting to suspect all of them in separate ways for the murder that has just happened. And I felt like it was such a lovely little found family thing. You could see that there were some people in this group who hadn't really got a whole lot of a support system to lean on, that they felt very alone in the world, that there wasn't really anyone that they could rely on. And I really love that towards the end of the book, you do genuinely see this as a found family situation. You do see them sitting together and having dinner and coming together and supporting each other. I really, really enjoyed this book. It has got the same trademark humour that the Dial A for Auntie series does. It's also set in Indonesia, where Jesse Q. Sutanto is from, and it was so interesting to see that culture being represented in books. It's something I would absolutely love to see again. I also listened to the audiobook of this, and I found that it was really immersive. It was so entertaining. It was so gripping. The narrator of the audiobook gave everyone really distinctive personalities and really distinctive voices, so you always knew exactly who was talking. And I absolutely loved this book. I'm not sure if there's going to be a follow-up to this like there was to Dial A to Aunties, but if there is, I would absolutely love to see it. I then read Sally in the City of Dreams by Judy Curtin. This was sent to me by the publisher because I took part in the blog tour for Sally in the City of Dreams, and I will link the blog post that I reviewed this in. But I had such a great time with this book. I genuinely did not expect to love this as much as I did. This book is following Sally and Bridget, who are 2 sisters that have left their family's farm in, I think it's either Cork or Kerry, and are moving to New York to have new opportunities, new life, and to get a little bit of money to send back to their families. This is something that happened quite a lot in Ireland in the 1910s, 1920s. So reading this was a really great reminder of my own country's history. And I think it would be a really great way to introduce the topic of immigration and poverty and moving away so that you can help to continue supporting your family to a younger person. I think it would be really great for people who are like 8, 9, 10 years old. On the boat over, Sally and Bridget meet Julia, who is also moving to New York. Her brother has been living there for 10 years, and she is going to move in with him and also kickstart a new life for herself. However, they can't get in touch with Julia's brother, so Julia moves in with Sally and Bridget to live with their family cousin Catherine, who turns out to be a completely different person than the family had told her she would be. Then, a couple of months later, when they are just starting to settle into their lives in New York, there is a big event happening where everything is thrown into turmoil. They may not even be allowed to stay in the country, and I feel like this was written really well. It was a little bit confusing at times. There were a couple of things that were a little bit far-fetched, I thought. But overall, this is such a wonderful children's book. Something that I also really like about this is that in the back of the book, you are told the actual story of Judy's grandparents who went over to America, stayed there for a couple of years, and then came back home to Ireland, which is also something that would have happened. A lot of people who had emigrated to the UK or to the US started to come back home when things were going a little bit better. There are a couple of pictures of Ellis Island. There are some pictures of her family history. And I really love that connection that she has with it. You can tell from reading the book that this is something that's a little bit more personal to her, and I genuinely loved it. Then I listened to The Witches by Roald Dahl, and I listened to the audiobook of this narrated by Miranda Richardson, and I am so glad that I did because it is so incredibly immersive. You can hear pots bubbling in the background when the characters are in the kitchen. You can hear murmuring and whispering in the background when there is a crowd murmuring and whispering. I thought it was so well done, and it really added to the kind of tense and spooky atmosphere of the story. This book follows an unnamed 8-year-old boy who is living with his grandmother, who came from Norway. He used to live in Norway with her and his parents, but his parents were killed in a car crash. So now he is moving back to the UK, where he had actually grown up and gone to school with his grandmother in tow. Every night she comes into his room and tells him the story about witches and how they can look like every modern woman, except there are a couple of things that you need to watch out for. Witches, for example, are always wearing gloves, they are always wearing pointed shoes, they have very kind of different coloured pupils. I know there's been a lot of discussion about how Roald Dahl books have aged like milk, and I do think that this is one of the ones that has particularly aged pretty badly. The description of women is obviously not something that is totally okay. It could have done with a bit more cleaning up. It could have done with a bit more respect for women, let's be honest. And I haven't read any of the new updated versions. I don't know what kind of a road they have gone down with, but I'm hoping it's a little bit gentler this time. It's an interesting book for kids. It's one that they might want to read at Halloween, but it's one that parents might raise an eyebrow or two at, and maybe keep an eye on that one when you're thinking about it. Then I listened to None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. This was a kind of a wildcard pick for me. I had just been flicking through my library's account and I had said, oh, okay, this seems like it's up for borrow right now. And I knew a couple of people who'd read Lisa Jewell books already. I know that Michelle from Michelle Library has read a couple of them. I know that Brittany from Brittany Loves Reading has read a couple of them. So I messaged both of them and asked if they thought this would be a good place to start. And both of them instantly said, yes, put everything down, go for it now. I am so glad that they did. And I'm also so glad that I listened to the audiobook of it. Like I said about the witches, this is so immersive. When there's interviews in a coffee shop for the podcast, you can actually hear coffee being brewed in the background. You can hear customers talking to each other. When characters are out on a late night walk, you can kind of hear cars passing by or wind rustling through trees. It's so immersive and it was so well done. This book's following Alex and Josie, who it turns out are birthday twins. They were not only born on the same day of the same year, but they were also born in the same hospital. Josie spots Alex celebrating in a pub that she and her husband have gone to on the night of their birthdays, and Josie approaches Alex, who is a well-loved social media influencer and has a podcast of her own, and Josie brings the idea of a birthday twin. Why don't we do a program about that? You can interview me and about how you can be born on the same day as somebody else, but your lives can go in totally different directions. What follows is not quite a story about birthday twins and how lives have gone in diverging directions, but a relationship that Josie has been in since she was about 14 or 15 years old, and how it is not the kind of relationship that she should have been in, and now she is realizing things have started to go wrong in her life, and there is no way for her to get back out of it. This book absolutely blew me away. I listened to it starting at the end of one work day, and then as soon as I got back to work the day after, I put my headphones in and I did not stop until I had gotten to the end of it. It completely gripped me. It completely dragged me in. I still have so many questions about the ending of this book. I still have so many questions about what had happened to get us to the ending of this book, and anyone that I've spoken to has had totally different theories about it and has totally different ideas as to how we had gotten there. There's so much happening where you are brought down this one street and you think everything is happening as you are expecting it to, and then you turn a corner and something completely different is actually in front of you. I am so intrigued by this author now. I really want to go and check out all of the other Lisa Jewell books that are available, even though I have been told by Michelle and by Brittany that I have kind of shot myself in the foot by starting with the best one. Let's see what else Lisa Jewell has in store for me. Then for my in-person book club here in Berlin, I read Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. This is my first ever Claire Keegan book, although I know Foster has been such a popular one. I think it's been on a Leaving Cert syllabus maybe 5 or 6 years ago by this stage. This is about Furlong, and this book is set in the lead up to Christmas, I think about 1985, 1986, when Ireland is pretty much balls deep in recession. People are losing jobs left, right and centre. There's people emigrating to the US and the UK on a daily basis, and the numbers are starting to grow and grow again. Furlong is living with his wife Eileen and their 5 daughters in a very small house in a very small town, I believe in Wexford. There are mentions of New Ross, there are mentions of Waterford, which are very close to one another, so I think that he's living somewhere in County Wexford. Furlong is a coal delivery driver, so he comes to the coal house every morning of the week bar Sunday, picks up the bags and then drives around the town to deliver everything to the houses. And this is something that is so familiar to me because my parents have also had coal deliveries brought to the house. Bigger ones throughout Christmas, smaller ones in the middle of the summer so that they are just ready for the cold weather to come again. I really loved that kind of reminder of home. I thought it was so comforting and so cozy. Picturing that coal going into the fireplace afterwards. Something else that was really familiar to me about home was, because this was coming up to Christmas, Furlong was talking about people who were giving him envelopes of like £5 notes just so that he has something at Christmas time, which is also something that my parents do. They will give a tip to the postman, they will give a tip to our coal delivery drivers, they will give a tip to the grocery delivery drivers. It's something that happens quite a lot in Ireland over Christmas time. There's a little bit of, oh, go on, thank you for everything that you've done throughout this year. I felt like it was such a representation of home that I haven't seen in any other book that I've read this year. One day, while Furlong is out delivering coal, he goes to a house near a monastery and near an abbey, and this house really stays with him. There are things in here that he has never seen before. There are things in here that he had never thought would be happening in his own country. There's atrocities that he has no idea has happened behind the scenes. This was, without putting too much of a veil on it, a mother and baby home, but not directly addressed as so. But there were little intricacies in the book that you just knew from having an idea of what a mother and baby home was. You would have an idea as to what was happening when Furlong had gone home, having found one of the girls who'd been out overnight. You knew what was happening as soon as the doors were closed. Like with None of This Is True, the ending of this slightly confused me. I'm a little bit concerned and a little bit worried as to what's going to happen after we have left the book off. I actually felt like the ending of this was a little bit too abrupt. I feel like it just stopped in the middle of a sentence and we never found out what happened afterwards. And I think that is something that would have happened with a lot of people around Ireland at the time, that their stories were never finished, that their stories were never told, that we never really heard what happened to them after they had left the home or after they had gotten to the home in the first place. I feel like that was also really well written, but it was also so frustrating to read. Those are the books that I read in October that I can actually tell you about, and there are a couple of others that you're going to find out a little bit about just a little bit later on. What was the best book that you read in October, or have you got our sights on any of these now? If you'd love to leave me a comment but you can't think of anything you'd like to say, then just leave me a pumpkin emoji. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.